the outskirts of Fairfax County, Virginia, where the dense woods seem to close in on the narrow roads, there is an old railway bridge that carried a sinister legend. The locals called it the Bunny Man Bridge. Stories of a man dressed in a rabbit costume who would haunt the area, wielding an axe and chasing anyone who dared to come too close. Some said he was an escaped convict, others claimed he was a ghost of a disturbed soul. Either way, the bridge was a place of fear and curiosity. One chilly October night, Nicole, a college student home for break, decided to visit the bridge with a small flashlight and her camera. The dirt road leading to the bridge was lined with trees, their bare branches clawing at the sky. The air was thick and still, her footsteps muffled by the soft earth beneath her. When she reached the bridge, the moonlight illuminated its crumbling stone and the graffiti-covered walls. The air seemed colder there, the silence oppressive. Nicole stood under the bridge, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. She aimed her camera at the structure, snapping photos of the eerie surroundings. But as the flash went off, she caught a flicker of movement at the edge of her vision. She turned sharply, her flashlight sweeping the darkness, but there was nothing there, only the faint rustling of leaves in the windless night. The uneasy feeling in her chest grew as she moved closer to the center of the bridge. Her flashlight beam caught something on the ground, a pile of broken branches arranged in an unnatural pattern. The air seemed heavier, as if the atmosphere itself was pressing down on her. Then she heard it, a faint scraping sound, distant but growing closer, like metal dragging across stone. Her pulse quickened, and she swung the flashlight towards the source of the sound. A shape emerged from the shadows, a figure standing just beyond the bridge, barely visible in the faint moonlight. It was tall, its outline distorted by the dim glow, but she could make out something horrifying. Long, floppy ears perched atop its head, and what looked like an axe glinting in its hand. Panic set in and Nicole turned and ran, her footsteps pounding against the dirt path as she fled back towards her car. When she finally reached her car, she jumped in and locked the doors, her hands trembling as the engine started. She sped away, the bridge disappearing in a rearview mirror, but the memory of that figure stayed with her. Nicole never returned to the Bunny Man Bridge, and she didn't need proof anymore. The legend was real, and she had seen it with her own eyes. In the dense forest of Washington, far from the bustling cities and the quiet towns, there was a place whispered about by locals, Mel's Hole, a deep, mysterious pit said to stretch endlessly into the earth. It was rumored to have strange, supernatural qualities. Some claimed it was a bottomless hole. Others said it could heal the dead or turn animals into strange, unrecognizable creatures. Despite the stories, no one has ever truly investigated, and the pit's existence was left to the realm of legend. A man named Derek, intrigued by the rumors and driven by his own curiosity, decided to find Mel's Hole. He had heard the stories from an old friend who swore they had seen the hole, but like many before him, Derek was skeptical. As he walked, the stories echoed in his mind, the tales of strange occurrences near the hole, the chilling reports of people who had gone in and never come out. But he dismissed them as superstitions, mere folklore meant to keep people away. After hours of trekking, Derek arrived at a clearing. And there it was, a deep, unnerving hole in the ground. Its edges were jagged, the earth around it disturbed, as if someone had been pulled down into it. The pit seemed to swallow the light, its depths shrouded in a darkness that no flashlight could penetrate. Derek stood at the edge, peering down into the unknown, the air growing heavier as he leaned closer. A faint, unnatural hum seemed to emanate from the hole, though he couldn't pinpoint its source. Without hesitation, Derek tossed a small rock into the pit, waiting for the sound of it hitting the bottom. But there was no sound, nothing. The rock seemed to fall forever, swallowed by the darkness without a trace. His heart raced, the hum growing louder, vibrating through the soles of his boots. Something about the hole felt wrong, as if it were drawing him in, beckoning him to step closer. He turned to leave, but then he saw it, a dark shape moving at the edge of his vision. It was quick, almost too fast to make out, but there was something wrong about it. Derek turned and ran, his heart pounding through his chest, the hum of the hole still vibrating through the air behind him. He didn't stop until he was back at his car, gasping for breath, his mind racing. The forest was silent again, but Derek knew what he had felt. Mel's Hole was real, and the stories had not been mere legends. There was something in that hole, something ancient, powerful, that should never be disturbed. In the shadow of the Appalachian Mountains, where the mist curled through the trees and the rivers cut deep through the valleys, the town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, had long been steeped in mystery. For years, the locals had whispered of an eerie creature, the Mothman, with glowing red eyes and massive wings that spread like darkness itself. People spoke of strange occurrences in the 1960s, sightings of the creature, car accidents, and a looming sense of foreboding that seemed to accompany its presence. But most dismissed the stories as mere superstition, until the unthinkable happened. One foggy evening, a young woman named Sarah, who had grown up in Point Pleasant, returned to the town after many years. The small town had changed little since her childhood, the streets still quiet and the houses nestled closely together. As Sarah drove into town, following the narrow winding roads that led towards the river, the fog had thickened as dusk fell, and the world outside her car windows seemed to disappear into a white haze. She passed the old TNT area, where strange events had once been reported, unexplained sightings, strange lights in the sky, and figures in the distance. It was a place of mystery, a place Sarah had always avoided in her youth. A shadow moved across the road in front of her, just at the edge of her headlights. For a moment, Sarah thought it was a trick of the light, or perhaps a deer moving through the fog. But then she saw it again, a large, dark shape, far too large to be an animal. The shape was no longer moving with the grace of an animal, but in strange, jerky motions as if were gliding across the ground. She turned the headlights on full beam, her heart thudding in her chest. What she saw made her blood run cold. A massive winged figure, its body shrouded in darkness. Its glowing red eyes reflected the light of her car, like twin lanterns in the dense fog. The creature stood tall, its wings unfolded like the pages of a dark book, casting an ominous shadow over the ground. Sarah froze, her hands gripping the wheel as the Mothman stood before her, its form shifting in and out of focus within the thick fog. The creature didn't approach, but Sarah felt its presence pressed against her like a physical weight. Then, without a sound, it unfurled its wings and took into the sky, disappearing into the fog with a sweep of darkness. The mist swallowed it whole, leaving only the eerie silence in its wake. Sarah sat frozen, her breath shallow, her mind reeling from what she had just witnessed. The creature was gone, but the memory of its presence lingered, haunting her. The drive back to town was a blur, her eyes never leaving the rearview mirror, half expecting the Mothman to appear once more. Point Pleasant, for all its quiet charm, had a dark secret, a secret that some things in the mist were never meant to be understood. The Mothman was real, and it was waiting. Deep in the heart of the Wisconsin woods, where the trees grew thick and the underbrush seemed to hide secrets in the shadows, there was a legend that had been passed down for generations. The Hodag. This creature, a fearsome mix of bear, wolf, and reptile, with spiked horns and a body covered in thick, scaly skin, was said to prowl the dense forest around Rhinelander. Though many dismissed the tale as folklore, there were whispers of strange occurrences, disappearances, footprints larger than any known animal, and unsettling growls echoing through the woods at night. Evan, an outdoor enthusiast, decided to hike through the woods to see if there was any truth to the legend. The forest was dense and quiet as Evan ventured deeper into the woods. The sun had long begun to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows between the trees, and the temperature began to drop. Suddenly, a low guttural growl broke the silence, echoing through the forest like a distant thunderclap. Evan froze, his heart pounding in his chest. The sound was unlike any animal he'd ever heard, a deep rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate through the earth. He held his breath, his flashlight trembling in his hand, but the sound didn't come again. For a moment, he thought it was just his imagination playing tricks on him. Then, through the trees, something moved. It was quick, too quick, and before he could react, a massive shape darted across his path. A cold sweat broke out on his brow as the growl echoed again, much closer this time. He could feel the vibrations on the ground beneath his feet, and the hair on the back of his neck stood on end. He turned quickly, retracing his steps towards the trailhead, his breath shallow and ragged. Every rustle in the bushes, every snap of a twig felt like a threat. The growl came once more, followed by the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps, a creature moving through the forest with a terrifying grace. When he finally reached the edge of the woods and the safety of the clearing, he didn't stop running until he was in his car, the engine roaring to life beneath his hands. The next day, Evan couldn't bring himself to share what had happened. He had no proof, no footage, just a lingering memory of the growls and the rush of terror that had driven him to flee. The Hodag, for all its mythical nature, was real in that moment, something ancient, something that lurked in the Wisconsin woods, waiting. In the vast open plains of Wyoming, where the wind howled across the lands and the Platte River wound its way through the landscape, there was an old legend, the tale of the ghostly ship that had been drifting along the river at night. The ship was said to appear out of nowhere, its sails full despite the absence of wind, and its lights flickering like the eerie glow of lanterns. No one knew the origins of the ship, but it was said to carry the souls of those lost long ago, doomed to sail forever along the river, never reaching their destination. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the river, a young man named Andrew found himself in the area. Andrew set out on a small boat, drifting along the water, his flashlight the only source of light in the growing darkness. But as the night deepened, a strange stillness settled over the water. The wind died down, and the world seemed to grow unnaturally quiet. Andrew continued his journey, unaware that something was stirring in the distance. Suddenly, a soft glow appeared at the far end of the river. Faint at first, but growing brighter with each passing moment. The hair on the back of his neck stood on end as the light slowly became more distinct, forming into a shape of a ship, an enormous silent vessel, its sails billowing despite the lack of wind. The ship glided effortlessly across the water, its presence both majestic and haunting, casting an ethereal reflection on the calm surface of the river. Andrew's heart began to race as the ship drew closer. Its eerie glow illuminated the water, but as he tried to move closer to get a better look, the ship seemed to recede further into the distance. He paddled faster, his eyes locked onto the glowing silhouette, but no matter how hard he tried, the ship always stayed just out of reach. A chill ran down his spine as he realized that the ship was not bound by the laws of nature. It moved with an unnatural grace, its sails untouched by the breeze and its path unbroken by the river's current. Finally, with his hands trembling and his breath coming in shallow gasps, Andrew turned his boat and began paddling back towards the shore. The ship, as if sensing his retreat, seemed to fade into darkness, its light dimming until it was nothing more than a memory on the river. When Andrew finally reached the shore, his heart still racing, the world around him returned to its peaceful stillness. The river was calm, the stars bright above, and there was no sign of the ghostly ship. He didn't speak of that encounter to anyone, but from that moment on, he knew that Platte River held more than just water and land. It held the lingering echoes of the past, the shadows of the lost, and the ghostly ship that sailed forever in search of its final destination.